The Carthane Dominion arrived at the edge of the Sol system without ceremony. No grand speech, no warning, no dramatic declaration echoing across the stars. One moment humanity's telescopes watched the cold darkness beyond Pluto, and the next moment the darkness moved. Mass signatures appeared across every deep space monitoring station simultaneously. Massive, artificial, impossible. At first, astronomers thought the sensors were malfunctioning. Then the objects slowed. Then they organized. Then they turned toward Earth. And every person monitoring the systems understood the same horrifying truth at exactly the same moment. Those things were ships. Hundreds of them. The first confirmed count reached 312 before the tracking systems began lagging behind the incoming telemetry. By the time the arrays stabilized, the number had climbed to 740. 740 alien warships, moving in perfect formation. Humanity had never seen even one extraterrestrial vessel before. Now an entire fleet was entering the solar system like it already owned it. Inside the command bridge of the Carthane flagship Sovereign Judgment, Fleet Executor Thalen Vey stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the pale holographic image of Earth rotating silently before him. Blue oceans, thin clouds, fragile atmosphere, primitive orbital infrastructure. The species called themselves humans. Thalen had reviewed the file once during transit and had not considered it important enough to revisit. Civilization age, approximately 7,000 recorded years. Interplanetary capability, limited. Military classification, minor regional species. Threat assessment, negligible. Like every world before them, Thalen Vey had conquered 93 civilizations for the Dominion. Some resisted for months. One had resisted for 8 years. None had survived. Not truly. Eventually every species understood the same thing. The Dominion did not lose wars. It absorbed them. The Executor watched tactical icons drift across the display. Human orbital stations, defense satellites, lunar shipyards, tiny things, unfinished things. The military advisor beside him shifted slightly. Human defense grid has entered elevated readiness posture, she reported calmly. Expected, Thalen replied. He did not sound interested, because he wasn't. This phase always looked the same. Fear, mobilization, desperate hope, then surrender. The advisor adjusted the holographic display. Surface governments appear fragmented. Multiple command structures. No unified planetary authority. Typical, Thalen said. Young civilizations always divided themselves before the Dominion arrived. It made conquest easier. The tactical display highlighted Earth's orbital defense platforms in red. 31 total. Kinetic launch systems. Nuclear missile reserves. Directed energy prototypes. Thalen almost smiled. Almost. The Dominion had rendered nuclear weapons obsolete centuries earlier. Humanity was still polishing stones while standing beneath an avalanche. Open planetary communications, he ordered. All channels. All of them. The communications officer nodded once. Around Earth, every screen activated simultaneously. Phones, billboards, cockpit displays, emergency broadcasts, televisions, military command centers, streaming services, traffic signs. Every system carrying visual output suddenly cut to black. Then the image appeared. A tall figure wrapped in silver-black command armor stared down at humanity with the stillness of something that had never needed to hurry. Fleet Executor Thalen Vey spoke in flawless English. Then Mandarin. Then Arabic. Then Hindi. Then hundreds more. The Dominion had spent years quietly listening to humanity before revealing itself. Studying. Translating. Preparing. We are the Carthane Dominion. His voice was calm. Not angry. Not emotional. That somehow made it worse. You are now within the territorial authority of the Dominion Expansion Directorate. Across Earth, people stopped moving. Cars drifted to the sides of roads. Restaurants went silent. Inside military bunkers, officers stared upward at frozen screens. Children looked at their parents. Parents had no answers. You will comply with transitional occupation procedures. The holographic image shifted. Now humanity could see the fleet. Hundreds of ships hanging above the planet like steel continents. Some were large enough to cast shadows across entire cities. We are authorized to use force sufficient to ensure compliance. No shouting, no threats, just certainty, like gravity explaining itself. In the interest of preserving your species' population levels, resistance is discouraged. In Sao Paulo, a bartender slowly lowered a glass he had been drying. In Lagos, an entire traffic intersection froze into absolute silence. In Tokyo, thousands of commuters stood motionless beneath giant digital screens. In Islamabad, a little girl asked her father if the people on the screen were gods. He couldn't answer. Inside NORAD, warning sirens screamed across command floors. Satellite feeds updated every half-second. 740 confirmed hostile vessels. No known weaknesses. No known diplomatic history. No known biological vulnerabilities. No known limits. The transmission continued. Your governments will receive surrender protocols shortly. The alien commander paused. And for the first time, there was the faintest trace of emotion in his expression. Not hatred. Not rage. Something worse. Professional boredom. You are Civilization 94. Then the transmission ended. For 4 full seconds, the internet went silent. No posts. No messages. No uploads. Nothing. Human civilization stopped breathing. Then the noise returned all at once. Panic exploded across the planet. Emergency broadcasts interrupted normal programming. World leaders vanished into secured locations. Financial systems crashed under stress loads. Religious gatherings flooded streets. Military aircraft launched from bases worldwide. Missile submarines disappeared beneath oceans. And above all of it, 740 alien warships continued descending toward Earth with the slow confidence of predators that had never once doubted the outcome of a hunt. Inside the Sovereign Judgment, Thalen Vey returned to his tactical reports. Resource extraction estimates appeared beside Earth's planetary model. Mineral wealth, exceptional. Water reserves, valuable. Population, labor-capable. Projected occupation timeline, 213 years. Efficient, profitable, routine. He studied the human military readouts one final time. Primitive fleet numbers, outdated propulsion systems, fragmented command structures, no meaningful deep space capability. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous, nothing that explained why, for the first time in almost 40 years, he felt a small, irrational discomfort pressing at the edge of his instincts. Thalen stared at Earth's orbital map for another few seconds. Then he dismissed the feeling entirely. Because civilizations like humanity always looked frightening to themselves. Right before they surrendered. The first hour after contact did not look like panic. It looked like disbelief. That was the strange part later historians always remembered. Not screaming. Not chaos. Silence. Humanity had spent centuries imagining first contact. Movies, books, scientific theories, religions predicting visitors from the stars. Entire industries built around the question, are we alone? But no one had imagined this. Not really, because deep down, humanity had always assumed that if aliens arrived, they would arrive curious, not organized for conquest. Across Earth, billions of people stared upward at skies that suddenly felt fragile. In New York, office workers crowded around windows overlooking Manhattan. In Cairo, entire streets stopped moving beneath glowing television displays replaying the transmission. In Seoul, a subway train sat motionless at a station because the operator had forgotten to close the doors. People kept checking their phones as if reality might update itself into something less terrifying. Didn't. The ships remained. 740 massive warships hanging beyond Earth's atmosphere. Watching. Waiting. Humanity's governments reacted faster than the public realized. Much faster. Inside the Pentagon, DEFCON protocols escalated within 3 minutes of the transmission ending. In Russia, Mobile missile systems vanished into forest networks under satellite camouflage. Chinese Orbital Command activated emergency combat coordination systems that had never been tested outside simulations. NATO fleets redirected toward strategic Atlantic positions. India sealed airspace across major military corridors. Submarines disappeared beneath oceans worldwide. For the first time in human history, every nuclear power on Earth entered maximum readiness simultaneously. And every military leader alive understood one horrifying fact. It would not matter. General Adrian Cole stood inside Strategic Command Sector 3 beneath Cheyenne Mountain and watched simulation outcomes collapse one after another across the tactical displays. Projected orbital resistance time, 19 minutes. Projected atmospheric survival rate after sustained bombardment, 12%. Probability of successful planetary defense, 0.03%. The AI paused after the final calculation as if embarrassed to say the number aloud. Cole rubbed both hands across his face slowly. No scenario improved. Not one. Humanity had prepared for wars against nations, against ideologies, against terrorism, against climate collapse, against artificial intelligence. But not this. Never this. An analyst approached carefully. Sir, the UN Emergency Assembly is requesting all major defense representatives in New York immediately. Cole nodded once. His eyes never left the tactical screen. Do they think this is a negotiation? The analyst hesitated. I think they need it to be. Elsewhere, ordinary people tried desperately to continue normal life. Most failed. Airports shut down under civilian overload. Hospitals reported panic-induced cardiac events in 37 countries. Religious broadcasts reached record global audiences within 40 minutes. Social media became a storm of fear, theories, prayers, and denial. Some people claimed the transmission was fake. Some claimed governments had known for years. Some insisted humanity should surrender immediately. Others demanded nuclear retaliation. The internet became humanity's nervous system having a seizure. And above all of it, the alien fleet never moved. That frightened people more than anything else. If the ships had attacked immediately, humanity could have reacted emotionally. Fear, rage, resistance. But the waiting created something worse. Anticipation. Like standing beneath an executioner who had not decided when to swing the blade. In Geneva, emergency diplomatic teams worked through translation models attempting to identify weaknesses in the Dominion's wording. There were none. The language was terrifyingly precise. Not emotional. Not cruel. Administrative. That was what made several analysts physically uncomfortable. The aliens spoke about conquering Earth the way a corporation discussed acquiring property. One linguistic expert quietly summarized the entire transmission in a single sentence. They don't hate us enough to be angry. That sentence spread through intelligence circles within the hour. No one liked hearing it. Inside a crowded apartment building in Buenos Aires, a 10-year-old boy named Elias sat beside his grandmother watching news anchors struggle to maintain composure on live television. Are we going to die? He asked softly. His grandmother looked toward the screen. 740 ships floated silently above Earth. One of the news reporters was crying while trying not to cry. The old woman pulled Elias closer against her side. Not today, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. In orbit above the planet, Dominion tactical scans swept calmly across human infrastructure. Cities, military bases, energy grids, communication arrays. Every sweep mapped humanity more thoroughly. Executor Thalen Vey reviewed the data while his officers processed surrender logistics. Projected compliance rate? He asked. 83% within the first week, the behavioral analyst replied. And resistance? Localized, uncoordinated. Expected collapse within 14 months. Thalen nodded. Acceptable. Humanity would resist in fragments. They always did. Young species fought emotionally instead of strategically. That made them predictable. One officer turned slightly from her station. Executor, There is an unusual amount of encrypted traffic moving between human governments. Thalen barely looked up. Expected. Volume is increasing exponentially. Fear produces communication spikes. The officer hesitated. Yes, Executor. He returned to the occupation projections. Below him, Earth spun silently through darkness. So fragile. So temporary. The Dominion had seen civilizations like this many times before. Species convinced they mattered. Species convinced survival was their destiny. Species who believed intelligence alone guaranteed significance. Eventually they all learned the same lesson. The universe did not care what they believed. And yet, as Thalen studied the tactical overlays, his eyes paused briefly on one strange detail. Several human military satellites had disappeared from expected positions. Not destroyed, moved. The change was minor, almost meaningless. Still, he enlarged the display. 3 missing satellites, then 5, then 11. No attack signatures, no launch detections, just absences. The tactical officer noticed his attention. Likely repositioning, she said. Probably. But Thalen kept looking another few seconds. Then another. Something about the movement bothered him. Not because it was threatening, because it was disciplined. Humanity was afraid. He could see that clearly across every transmission, every intercepted communication, every emergency broadcast flooding the planet. But beneath the fear, there was organization. Not everywhere, not publicly, but somewhere behind the chaos. Someone was moving pieces carefully. And experienced conquerors learned long ago that fear alone did not create discipline. Sometimes, discipline meant preparation. The program humanity was never supposed to need. The United Nations bunker beneath Geneva had officially never existed. No maps showed it. No public budget funded it. No government admitted it had been built. And yet, 43 world leaders descended into it within 2 hours of first contact. The elevators required 3 simultaneous biometric confirmations to operate. Fingerprint, retinal scan, DNA verification. Even then, the steel doors at the bottom did not open immediately. Security systems took another 14 seconds validating emergency authority codes before allowing humanity's leadership into the deepest protected chamber on Earth. The room itself was cold. Not dramatically cold. Precisely cold. The temperature had been intentionally calibrated years earlier because psychological studies showed lower temperatures improved long-duration crisis decision-making. No decorations. No national flags. No cameras. Only a circular table beneath white overhead lights and a massive tactical display covering the far wall. On it floated the Carthane fleet. 740 warships. Perfectly organized. Perfectly calm. Perfectly lethal. No one spoke for the first minute. Several leaders stared openly at the display. Others avoided looking at it entirely. President Elaine Ward of the North American Alliance finally broke the silence. Well, she said quietly, they certainly skipped diplomacy. A few exhausted laughs escaped around the room. Not because anything was funny, because human beings laughed when terror exceeded emotional capacity. General Adrian Cole stepped toward the tactical display. Current estimates indicate they can eliminate all major military infrastructure on Earth inside 6 hours if unrestricted orbital bombardment begins. No one interrupted. Our orbital defense systems cannot stop them. Another silence. Then Prime Minister Arif Rahman leaned forward slowly. So we surrender. Several heads turned toward him immediately. We survive, Rahman continued carefully. We preserve civilian populations. We buy time to understand what we're dealing with. And after that? Asked Chancellor Mei Chun. Rahman's jaw tightened. We adapt. General Cole looked like he wanted to say something. Didn't. Secretary General Sophia Devereux sat at the head of the table listening without expression. She had spoken exactly 3 words since entering the room. Continue, General. That was all. Now she rested one hand lightly against the table while arguments spread around her. Some demanded immediate resistance. Others wanted diplomatic engagement. Several military leaders advocated partial compliance while preparing insurgency networks. One representative quietly suggested humanity should offer technological cooperation voluntarily before the Dominion demanded it. That suggestion nearly started a fistfight. The fear inside the room was becoming visible now. Not panic, fracture. People trying desperately to solve a problem too large for the human mind to process comfortably. Above them floated a fleet capable of erasing civilization. And somewhere inside every leader present existed the same terrible question. What if this is the end of our species? Sophia Devereux checked her watch. Once. Then again 4 minutes later. Former President Luis Ortega noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting. While the room spiraled through strategy debates, the Secretary General remained strangely calm. Not relaxed. Never relaxed. But controlled. Like someone listening to a storm they had already heard approaching long before everyone else. Finally Chancellor Chun leaned forward. Sophia. The room quieted slightly. You haven't offered a position. Every face turned toward her. For a few seconds, the only sound came from the ventilation system, humming softly through reinforced walls. Then Sophia stood. She walked toward the center of the room carrying a thin black folder. No markings. No identification codes. Several security officials visibly reacted when they saw it. Recognition. Fear. Sophia placed the folder on the table carefully, then opened it. Inside rested a single sheet of paper. Only one line was printed across the center. The room frowned collectively. Prime Minister Rahman blinked. What is that? Sophia looked around the table. Ship count. Silence. Complete silence. No one moved. Several leaders genuinely appeared not to understand the sentence. General Cole stared at her, then at the paper, then back at her again. What ship count? Sophia answered calmly. Ours. The room exploded. Questions crashed into each other instantly. What? That's impossible. Since when? Where? Who authorized? Sophia raised one hand, and somehow the room quieted. Not because she was powerful, because suddenly everyone sensed reality shifting beneath their feet. 32 years earlier, humanity's deep space observation arrays intercepted artificial signals originating far beyond explored space. At first scientists believed them natural phenomena. Then the patterns repeated, then translated, then decoded. Not language, military logistics, fleet movement, expansion records, conquest data. The first confirmed references to the Carthage Dominion appeared 8 months later. Humanity learned 3 things immediately. First, the Dominion was real. Second, it was expanding toward Earth. Third, humanity could not survive open war against it. So the governments of Earth made a decision. Not public, not democratic, necessary. They would prepare in secret. Sophia spoke quietly while stunned leaders listened in absolute disbelief. 32 years ago, Project Aegis began construction beyond the Kuiper Belt. The tactical display behind her changed. And suddenly, ships appeared. Thousands of them. Massive shipyards hidden inside hollowed asteroids. Dark fleets concealed within debris fields. Construction platforms buried inside frozen dwarf planets. The room stared in shock. General Cole actually stepped backward. This is real. Yes. How many people knew? Very few. Sophia enlarged the display. Rows of warships filled the screen. Destroyers, carriers, siege platforms, interception fleets. All hidden in deep space for decades. Built silently. Built invisibly. Built for this exact day. We redirected resources gradually over 30 years. Sophia explained. Disguised expenditures inside civilian infrastructure programs, climate engineering initiatives, asteroid mining projects, lunar development budgets. President Ward looked physically pale. You built a fleet larger than every navy in human history combined. We built survival. Prime Minister Rahman shook his head slowly. This should have been impossible to hide. It almost wasn't. Sophia met his eyes. Which is why secrecy mattered more than politics. The room fell quiet again. A different quiet now. Not hopelessness. Shock. Because for the first time since the invasion began, possibility existed. General Cole stepped toward the tactical screen. His military instincts were finally catching up to what he was seeing. 5,182 ships, he whispered. Sophia nodded once. Operational. And the Dominion has no idea? We were careful to make sure they saw exactly what they expected to see. The tactical display shifted again. Now it showed Earth's visible military forces. Small, outdated, weak, perfect lie. We allowed them to believe humanity remained fragmented and technologically immature, Sophia said. We leaked false infrastructure data, limited visible fleet expansion, restricted deep space emissions. Chancellor Chun stared at her. You baited them. No, Sophia replied softly. We invited them close enough to hurt. The room absorbed that sentence slowly, very slowly. Then General Cole asked the question everyone else was suddenly thinking. When do we launch? Sophia looked toward the tactical display showing the alien fleet hanging above Earth. Her expression hardened for the first time. They're already moving. The fleet hidden in the dark, beyond Pluto, beyond the mapped edges of human civilization, beyond the cold drift of forgotten comets. The darkness woke up. For 32 years, the ships of Project Aegis had remained silent. No running lights, no active radar, no thermal signatures strong enough to separate them from surrounding debris fields. Human engineers had hidden entire fleets inside the dead shadows of the solar system. Asteroids became dry docks. Frozen moons became factories. Mining colonies became weapons laboratories. Everything humanity built in secret had one purpose: survive first contact. And now that moment had arrived. Inside Deep Command Nexus Theta, buried within the hollow core of a dwarf planet officially classified as uninhabitable, Admiral Elias Navarro stood alone before a dark tactical window overlooking thousands of dormant warships. They floated silently in endless blackness. Sleeping giants. Waiting. Navarro was 64 years old. Half his life had belonged to Project Aegis. He had sacrificed marriages, friendships, careers, entire decades of normal existence. Everyone involved in the program had. Because secrecy demanded isolation. No recognition, no medals, no public history. Humanity could never know they existed until the exact second it became necessary. And if that second never came, they would die as ghosts. A communications officer approached carefully through the dimly lit command deck. Priority transmission from Geneva, Admiral. Navarro took the encrypted tablet. One word appeared on the screen. Begin. Nothing else. No speech. No ceremony. Just the activation code humanity had prepared for 32 years. Around him, officers stopped pretending to work calmly. Some stared quietly at tactical displays. Others closed their eyes briefly. One woman near the navigation pit whispered something under her breath that might have been a prayer. Navarro looked back toward the darkness outside. Then he gave the order. Wake the fleet. For half a second, nothing happened. Then a single ship illuminated. Far away in the darkness, pale white running lights flickered alive across the hull of a heavy cruiser nearly 4 kilometers long. Then another activated beside it. Then 3 more. Then 10. Then hundreds. And suddenly the void itself seemed to catch fire. Across hidden sectors scattered throughout the outer solar system, thousands of human warships powered online simultaneously. Engines awakened. Reactor cores ignited. Targeting systems initialized. Silent vessels that had waited decades for purpose finally announced themselves to existence. From a distance, it looked like entire constellations turning on. Crew members throughout the fleet felt vibrations spread through decks beneath their feet as dormant systems roared awake for the first time in years. On the carrier Resolute Dawn, Lieutenant Miyasato grabbed the edge of her console as the massive vessel's primary engines began cycling upward. The deck trembled softly. All around her, officers moved with terrifying discipline. No panic. No celebration. Just focus. because every person aboard knew exactly what activation meant. The war humanity feared had finally arrived. A voice echoed across the fleet-wide command network. Admiral Navarro. Calm. Steady. Human. All Aegis elements confirm operational readiness. One by one, confirmations flooded the system. Battle Group Orion online. Europa Defense Wing operational. Titan Fleet Command ready. Helios Strike Division standing by. Thousands of ships. Thousands of voices. One fleet. Maya stared at the tactical display updating across her console. 5,182 active combat vessels. She had seen the number before during simulations, training exercises, war projections, but seeing it alive, moving, real, felt different. Humanity had built this, secretly, patiently, while the rest of the world lived ordinary lives beneath peaceful skies. Her father had died believing she worked on deep space mining logistics. Her mother thought she repaired research satellites. No one outside Project Aegis knew the truth. Not until now. Navigation solutions confirmed. Her commander announced. Primary acceleration routes locked. The giant carrier slowly rotated in darkness. Around it, thousands of ships adjusted formation with machine-like precision. The fleet looked less like a military force, and more like an entire civilization preparing to move. At the center of Nexus Theta, Admiral Navarro finally sat inside the command chair he had avoided touching for almost 6 years. Because once he sat there, the waiting ended. He opened a secure channel to Geneva. Secretary General Sophia Devereux appeared instantly on the screen. For a moment neither spoke. Two people carrying the weight of an entire species. Finally Navarro broke the silence. Status. Sophia answered immediately. The Dominion believes negotiations are beginning. Navarro almost smiled. Good. They're deploying occupation assessment teams within 18 hours. His expression hardened again. Then we move before they settle. Sophia nodded once. No dramatic speech. No emotional declaration. Both understood the stakes too clearly for theatrics. Humanity is with you, Admiral, she said quietly. Navarro looked out across the awakening fleet. Thousands of warships glowing in darkness like stars humanity had built with its own hands. No, he replied softly. Humanity built this with us. Then the transmission ended. Far beyond Earth, Project Aegis began accelerating inward. 5,182 hidden warships turned toward home simultaneously. The movement created the single largest coordinated military mobilization in human history, and still, the Carthage Dominion saw none of it, because their scans focused inward, toward Earth, toward surrender protocols, toward occupation strategy. Executor Thalen Vey stood aboard the Sovereign Judgment reviewing planetary extraction estimates while human fleets crossed the darkness beyond his sensor range. One officer approached his command platform carefully. Executor, long-range arrays detected a brief energy fluctuation beyond the Kuiper perimeter. Thalen barely looked up. Source, unclear. Possibly gravitational distortion from debris interaction. Threat level. The officer hesitated. Minimal. Thalen dismissed the report with one wave of his hand. Outer system anomalies were common in undeveloped star systems, especially systems filled with primitive mining activity. He returned to Earth's occupation models, projected labor conversion, infrastructure control, resource extraction efficiency, routine conquest mathematics. Outside his flagship windows, Earth rotated slowly beneath the Dominion fleet. Fragile, contained, already conquered. At least, that was what Thalen still believed. Meanwhile, hidden in the darkness between frozen worlds, human engines burned brighter. 5,182 warships accelerated through deep space in absolute radio silence, like a knife moving beneath black water. Coming home, humanity learns to lie beautifully. The official surrender arrived 16 hours after first contact. It reached the Dominion flagship through secured diplomatic channels encoded in 12 human languages and formatted according to the occupation procedures the Carthage had transmitted earlier. Executor Thalen Vey read the document while drinking tea imported from one of the Dominion's agricultural worlds. His expression never changed. Of course they surrendered. They always did. Civilizations talked about bravery constantly right until survival became mathematically impossible. Then they became practical. Thalen respected practicality. The human document was formal, carefully worded, filled with requests for transitional stability measures, civilian protections, infrastructure preservation agreements, and phased administrative integration. Young species always focused on preserving familiar systems, comforted them. He signed the acceptance authorization without hesitation. "Transmit acknowledgement," he ordered. "Yes, Executor. Begin occupation staging." The bridge officers moved immediately. Around Earth, Dominion warships slowly repositioned into orbital control formations. Not combat formations anymore. Administrative formations. That distinction mattered, because in the Dominion's experience, the war had already ended. Below them, humanity performed surrender with extraordinary professionalism. Government representatives appeared publicly. Emergency diplomatic councils formed. Military stand-down announcements spread across global broadcasts. Several orbital defense platforms even powered down visibly under Dominion observation. The Carthane approved of this. Orderly species adapted more efficiently. Inside the Geneva bunker, Secretary General Sophia Devereux watched the alien fleet reposition on the tactical display while exhaustion hollowed every face around the command chamber. No one celebrated. No one relaxed. Because now came the most dangerous part of the entire strategy. Delay. General Cole stood beside the main operations table reviewing synchronized countdown clocks. "Estimated Aegis arrival?" he asked. 104 hours. Too long. Far too long. The Dominion occupation teams would begin landing within the next day. Once ground control infrastructure activated fully, hiding human resistance movements would become exponentially harder. Sophia studied the tactical projections carefully. "We buy every minute we can." Prime Minister Rahman exhaled slowly. "And if they realize we're stalling?" Sophia answered honestly. "Then cities die." Silence settled over the room again. Nobody argued, because everyone understood the truth. The strategy only worked if the Dominion remained calm long enough for Project Aegis to reach engagement range. Every hour mattered now. Every conversation, every delay, every bureaucratic obstacle. Humanity was about to weaponize paperwork. And somehow that frightened several leaders more than open war. 3 hours later, Overseer Directive Envoy Kaler Tan arrived at the United Nations Administrative Complex under armed Dominion escort. He was tall even by Carthane standards. Thin, perfectly composed. His silver-gray eyes reflected light strangely, almost metallic beneath the overhead illumination. Everything about him radiated controlled superiority. He greeted humanity the way an executive might greet newly acquired employees. "Secretary General Devereux. Envoy Tan." They shook hands. Human skin against alien skin for the first time in recorded history. Neither species trusted the other, but both smiled politely. The meeting began immediately, and Sophia started lying. Not obvious lies, professional lies, the dangerous kind. "The population census verification process is slower than anticipated," she explained calmly while sliding digital reports across the table. "Human regional governance structures remain highly decentralized." Tan reviewed the documents quickly. "We require compliance acceleration." "Of course." Sophia nodded sympathetically. "We are attempting to stabilize several infrastructure coordination failures caused by the global emergency response. More paperwork. More delays. More explanations. Every sentence carefully engineered to sound cooperative while accomplishing absolutely nothing." Tan's expression remained unreadable. But beneath the table, Sophia's hands stayed perfectly still through sheer force of discipline. Because if the Carthane realized humanity was manipulating the transition timeline, the Dominion fleet would shift back into combat posture instantly, and Earth would burn before Project Aegis arrived. Elsewhere across the planet, Hidden operations accelerated beneath the illusion of surrender. Military engineers quietly rerouted power grids toward concealed defense networks. Submarine fleets vanished beneath deep ocean thermal shadows. Encrypted communications spread through resistance cells already prepared years earlier under Aegis contingency planning. Civilian infrastructure teams began converting transportation tunnels into emergency evacuation routes. Humanity moved beneath the surface now, quietly, carefully, like an animal pretending weakness while waiting for the right moment to bite. The Dominion noticed none of it, because the surrender looked convincing. That was the terrifying genius of the strategy. Humans weren't pretending to panic. They really were terrified. They weren't pretending to want survival. They genuinely did. Every fearful broadcast, every diplomatic request, every desperate negotiation. Real. Humanity simply hid one crucial truth beneath all of it. Fear did not mean surrender. Inside the Dominion command structure, occupation projections updated continuously. Compliance levels exceeded expectations. Civilian resistance remained minimal. Planetary leadership appeared cooperative. Executor Thalen Vey reviewed the reports with growing satisfaction. Efficient species, one officer remarked. More than most, Thalen agreed. The officer enlarged several live planetary feeds. Humans lined up calmly near food distribution centers. Emergency governments coordinated aid programs. Public broadcasts encouraged cooperation to minimize casualties. No organized military response. No orbital mobilization. No insurgency attacks. Humanity looked defeated. Thalen leaned back slightly inside his command chair. "See?" he said quietly to no one in particular. Intelligence eventually overcomes instinct. But deep inside Earth's hidden command systems, countdown clocks continued moving. 102 hours. In the outer solar system, Project Aegis accelerated harder. More reactors activated. More engines burned. The hidden fleet moved through darkness with terrifying speed now. Inside the carrier Resolute Dawn, Lieutenant Miyasato watched fleet telemetry streams update continuously across her console. 5,182 ships. Still climbing inward. Still unseen. The scale of the fleet no longer felt unreal. Now it felt inevitable, like history approaching. A communications alert flashed suddenly across her station. Priority message from Earth Command. Maya opened it immediately. The message contained only one sentence. Hold the line of deception. Nothing else. No speeches. No patriotic slogans. Just the truth. Humanity's survival depended on convincing the Dominion that humanity had already accepted defeat. And for now, the Carthane believed the performance completely. That was the only reason Earth still existed. They refused to kneel correctly. The first Dominion transports landed in silence. No dramatic invasion. No fire raining from the sky. No marching armies descending beneath banners. That was not how the Carthane conquered worlds. Conquest, to them, was administration. The white transport vessels drifted downward through Earth's atmosphere with slow mechanical precision, settling near major population centers across the planet. New York, Mumbai, Berlin, Lagos, Sao Paulo, Jakarta, Cairo, Islamabad. Hundreds of cities watched alien ships descend through cloud cover like pieces of another universe forcing themselves into reality. The vessels were smooth, featureless, cold. No visible weapons. No visible engines. That frightened civilians more than war machines would have. Because war machines at least admitted violence openly. These ships looked like they expected obedience naturally. Dominion personnel emerged wearing silver-gray environmental armor marked with geometric insignias humanity still could not understand. Not soldiers, administrators, surveyors, infrastructure analysts, occupation specialists. The Carthane did not arrive expecting battle anymore. They arrived expecting transition. And that insult burned deeper than open hatred. In downtown Nairobi, thousands gathered silently behind military barricades, watching alien assessment teams scan transportation hubs and power stations. No one attacked. No one shouted. The crowds simply stared. Human beings witnessing the first extraterrestrials in history should have felt awe. Instead, they felt humiliation, because the aliens looked at Earth the way investors looked at property. Inside Geneva, Secretary General Sophia Devereux watched live occupation feeds with a tightening jaw. "Civilian tension levels?" she asked. An analyst answered immediately. "Rising everywhere." Projected unrest maps spread across the tactical display. Red zones expanding. Humanity was reaching emotional saturation. Fear could only suppress anger for so long before it transformed into resistance. And resistance would trigger retaliation. General Cole stepped beside her. "We need to keep people calm." Sophia looked at the screen showing Dominion teams entering a school district in Buenos Aires. "No," she said quietly. "We need to keep people alive." But keeping people alive was becoming harder by the hour, because the Carthane fundamentally misunderstood humanity. The Dominion believed intelligent species behaved rationally under superior force. Most civilizations did. Humans didn't. Not consistently. Not when pride became involved. The first major confrontation happened outside Lahore. A Dominion survey convoy attempted to secure an elevated communications district near the city center. The operation should have taken 12 minutes. Instead, thousands of civilians blocked the roads. No weapons. No military support. Just ordinary people standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the burning afternoon heat, refusing to move. The Carthane officers issued warnings through translation drones. "Please clear designated infrastructure corridors." No one moved. This delay violates occupation compliance procedures. Still no movement. The crowd remained silent, a wall of human beings staring upward with exhausted hatred. One old man stepped forward slowly, carrying nothing except a faded national flag draped across his shoulders. The Dominion officers paused uncertainly. Behavioral resistance like this usually collapsed quickly. Species feared visible consequences. Humans apparently needed demonstrations first. The Carthane deployed sonic dispersal emitters. Invisible pressure waves struck the crowd instantly. People collapsed across the streets, clutching their heads in pain. Children screamed. Several elderly civilians lost consciousness immediately. The Dominion convoy resumed moving. Then something unexpected happened. The humans stood back up. Slowly, painfully, but they stood, and blocked the road again. Dominion officers exchanged confused glances. The emitters activated a second time. More civilians fell. Again the convoy advanced. Again humanity rose. Streaming drones captured everything live. Across Earth, billions watched ordinary civilians absorb alien punishment and continue resisting anyway. Not because they believed they could win, because surrender had begun to feel worse than fear. Inside the lead Dominion transport, Commander Selvarin reviewed the incident with growing irritation. "Why are they repeating the obstruction pattern?" he asked. One analyst studied the crowd behavior feeds carefully. "Emotional defiance response," she answered slowly. "That response is irrational." "Yes, Commander." "Then why continue?" The analyst hesitated, because she didn't fully understand the answer either. Humanity wasn't behaving according to predictive occupation models. They should have prioritized survival efficiency by now. Instead, they were prioritizing dignity, and that variable was much harder to control. Elsewhere, the situation deteriorated further. In Buenos Aires, civilians painted resistance symbols across occupation transit routes overnight. In Toronto, Dominion communications arrays were vandalized within 2 hours of installation. In Istanbul, workers intentionally slowed infrastructure integration by accidentally corrupting logistics databases. Tiny acts, meaningless individually, relentless collectively. Humanity resisted the way water resisted stone. Not through strength, through persistence. The Dominion adapted quickly. Curfews expanded. Security patrols increased. Public assembly restrictions activated. Still the resistance spread. Not organized yet. Not military. Something more dangerous. Emotional. Executor Thalen Vey reviewed the unrest reports aboard the Sovereign Judgment with visible annoyance for the first time since arriving at Earth. Projected stabilization? Extended beyond original estimates. How extended? Current models suggest 30 to 40 months before full civilian compliance. Thalen frowned. Too slow. Occupation efficiency depended on psychological collapse occurring early. Humanity should have accepted reality by now. Instead, they seemed increasingly angry. One tactical advisor enlarged footage from Lahore showing civilians repeatedly reforming after sonic dispersal strikes. Interesting behavioral resilience, she observed. No, Thalen replied coldly. Interesting behavioral stupidity. But privately, the footage unsettled him. Not because the humans were dangerous, because they continued resisting even when resistance clearly failed. That contradicted experience. Every species broke eventually. Fear always won in the end, didn't it? Meanwhile, beneath Earth's surface, the real resistance continued preparing. Project Aegis countdown, 87 hours. Sophia studied the timer alone inside her office after midnight. 87 hours. Too long. Every hour the Dominion remained planetside increased civilian casualties. Every hour increased the risk of discovery. She closed her eyes briefly, then reopened the next diplomatic obstruction files. Transportation delays, population verification disputes, agricultural allocation negotiations. Humanity was fighting the most important war in its history using bureaucracy and patience. And people were dying buying time for it. A secure transmission flashed across her desk. Outer System Update. Sophia opened it immediately. 5,182 warships continued accelerating toward Earth. Fleet cohesion stable. No detection. Projected arrival window maintained. For the first time all day, she allowed herself a single breath of relief. Then emergency alerts erupted across her tactical screens. Dominion retaliation strike confirmed. Location: Santiago Defensive District. Casualties: unknown. Sophia froze. Slowly the live footage appeared. Smoke rising above shattered buildings. Burning streets. Collapsed infrastructure. And Dominion broadcasts repeating the same translated message across emergency channels. Non-compliance creates unnecessary suffering. Sophia stared at the destruction silently, then looked back toward the countdown clock. 86 hours remaining. Humanity needed to survive 86 more hours before the war truly began. The moment the Dominion learned fear, Executor Thalen Vey was reviewing retaliation projections when the first anomaly appeared. At first it looked insignificant, a faint sensor fluctuation beyond the orbital edge of Neptune. Weak, intermittent, easy to dismiss. The bridge AI classified it as background distortion generated by debris interaction and long-range radiation interference. Normally Thalen would have ignored it immediately, but something about the signal irritated him. Perhaps because human resistance on Earth had already disrupted occupation efficiency beyond acceptable levels. Perhaps because the humans kept behaving incorrectly. Or perhaps because instinct, the oldest survival mechanism in intelligent life, was whispering quietly beneath his discipline. A sensor officer turned from her station. Executor, the anomaly has repeated. Thalen looked up slowly. Clarify. The officer enlarged the readings across the central display. A cluster of faint energy signatures pulsed deep in the outer solar system. Tiny, barely visible, still artificial. Estimated source? Unknown. Quantity? The officer hesitated. We're not certain. That answer alone changed the atmosphere on the bridge instantly. Dominion crews were trained never to sound uncertain during active operations. Thalen stood from his command chair. Show me. The holographic display expanded. Darkness filled the room. Then faint lights appeared across the edge of the system. Small, scattered, almost invisible. What am I looking at? Thalen asked quietly. The sensor chief swallowed once. We thought it was signal fragmentation initially, but the signatures are increasing. How many? Another pause. Current estimate, Approximately 120 contacts. Several officers exchanged confused looks. 120 ships? Impossible. No known human fleet could produce numbers remotely close to that. Thalen folded both hands behind his back. Recalculate. The bridge AI processed for several seconds. Then the number changed. 342 contacts. A low silence spread across the command deck. The officer stared at the display. That's not possible. Thalen's expression hardened. Nothing impossible appears on my bridge. Explain it. We're trying, Executor. The contacts multiplied again. 1,104. Now even the AI struggled maintaining accurate tracking resolution. Across the bridge, Dominion officers began speaking over one another. Could these be automated platforms? No known industrial output supports this scale. False echoes? Negative. Hidden fleet reserves? Humanity does not possess. The contact number jumped again. 2,047. And suddenly nobody was talking anymore. Thalen stepped closer to the tactical display slowly. Very slowly. The lights beyond Neptune no longer looked scattered. They looked organized. Formation patterns emerged. Fleet geometries. Military spacing. His pulse slowed dangerously. Not from fear. From concentration. Because for the first time in decades, something completely outside Dominion expectations had entered the battlefield. Run species identification. Unable to confirm. Propulsion analysis? Incomplete. Weapon signatures? Unknown. Unknown. The word landed heavily inside the silent bridge. The Dominion did not encounter unknown fleets. It especially did not encounter unknown fleets inside conquered systems. And yet the numbers kept climbing. 2,800. 3,400. 4,100. One tactical officer whispered something under his breath in the Carthane language. Prayer. Thalen heard it. So did everyone else. No one acknowledged it. The AI recalculated again. Finalized. 5182 contacts confirmed. The bridge became absolutely silent. Not even machinery seemed loud anymore. Executor Thalen Vey stared at the tactical projection showing more than 5,000 vessels accelerating inward from deep space. Human vessels. It had to be. There was no other explanation, which created a worse question immediately afterward. How? Humanity's visible industrial capacity couldn't support 1/10 those numbers. Their shipyards were primitive. Their military fragmented. Their deep space infrastructure nearly non-existent. Unless the realization arrived slowly, then all at once. The weak orbital defenses. The rapid surrender. The procedural delays. The missing satellites. The controlled panic. The occupation inefficiencies. Every strange detail suddenly aligned into one horrifying possibility. Humanity had lied. Not partially. Completely. For years. Maybe decades. And the Dominion walked directly into the deception. One officer finally found her voice. Executor orders? Thalen did not answer immediately, because this moment mattered. Conquerors survived by recognizing reality faster than pride allowed. And reality now stood undeniable before him. Earth was not a primitive world awaiting occupation. It was a prepared battlefield. Combat readiness, he ordered sharply. The bridge exploded into motion. Raise all fleet shields. Recall planetary assessment teams. Redirect occupation vessels to defensive positions. Wake reserve combat groups. Alarms flooded the flagship. Across Earth's orbit, Dominion formations rapidly shifted from occupation geometry back into wartime alignment. Too late. Far too late. Because the human fleet was already accelerating hard toward engagement range. Thalen enlarged the incoming formations again. 5,182 ships. And now, he could finally see them clearly. Human warships, massive carriers, heavy cruisers, siege destroyers, missile walls, electronic warfare platforms. Entire attack formations hidden in darkness for decades. The fleet moved with terrifying discipline. No wasted motion. No confusion. No hesitation. This was not an emergency mobilization. This was a force that had rehearsed for this exact war for years, possibly generations. Thalen felt something cold settle into his chest. Not panic. Recognition. The Dominion had not arrived as hunters. They had arrived as prey too arrogant to realize the trap had already closed. One communications officer turned sharply. Executor, we are receiving an open transmission. The bridge froze again. Source. The officer looked stunned. The approaching fleet. Thalen stared at the incoming armada. 5,182 ships continued advancing through darkness like a second civilization entering the solar system. Put it through. Static crackled briefly across the bridge speakers. Then a human voice filled the command deck. Calm. Measured. Completely unafraid. This is Admiral Elias Navarro of the United Earth Aegis Fleet. Behind him, the tactical display showed thousands of human ships burning through the darkness toward Earth. The voice continued. To the Carthane Dominion forces currently occupying our system. A small pause. Not dramatic. Controlled. You were invited here under false assumptions. Several Dominion officers physically stiffened. Navarro's voice never rose. Never shook. We believed first contact with your empire would eventually become unavoidable. So humanity spent 32 years preparing for this moment. Thalen listened without blinking. You mistook patience for weakness. The human admiral paused again, and somehow the silence felt heavier than shouting would have. Executor Thalen Vey. For the first time since arriving at Earth, someone spoke his name without fear. You now have one opportunity to withdraw every Dominion vessel from human territory. The tactical display updated continuously. The distance between fleets collapsed second by second. 5,182 human warships. Closer, closer, closer. Navarro spoke one final sentence. If you remain. Pause. This becomes a war. Then the transmission ended. Inside the sovereign judgment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because for the first time in 93 successful conquests, Executor Thalen Vey no longer knew who was supposed to surrender. We were never waiting to be saved. The silence after Admiral Navarro's transmission lasted exactly 11 seconds. On the bridge of the sovereign judgment, 11 seconds felt longer than entire campaigns. No one moved. No one spoke. Dominion officers stared at the tactical projections as if numbers themselves might suddenly become less real. 5,182 human warships. Still advancing. Still accelerating. Still perfectly organized. Executor Thalen Vey remained standing at the center of the bridge, while combat alarms echoed softly through the flagship. His officers waited for anger, for outrage, for immediate retaliation. Instead, Thalen did something unexpected. He replayed the transmission. Again, the human admiral appeared once more above the bridge holograms. Calm face, steady voice, no visible fear. That disturbed Thalen more than the fleet itself. Young civilizations were supposed to sound emotional, desperate, triumphant, terrified. This human commander sounded like a professional equal. And that changed the nature of the war instantly. One tactical advisor broke the silence carefully. Executor, their confidence may be psychological manipulation. Thalen answered without looking away from the hologram. No. The officer stiffened. They believe they can win. The bridge absorbed that quietly. Because confidence at this scale only came from one of two things. Madness. Or preparation. And the approaching fleet did not move like madmen. It moved like a weapon sharpened for decades. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship Resolute Dawn, Admiral Elias Navarro stood inside the fleet command chamber, watching Dominion formations reorganize around Earth. Occupation geometry was collapsing now. The enemy finally understood this would not be administrative. This would be war. Human officers moved calmly around him. No cheering. No emotional celebration. The fleet had trained too long for that. Every person aboard understood the truth. The reveal phase was over. Now came the dying. Commander Miyasato approached the tactical platform carrying updated engagement projections. Dominion vessels are transitioning into layered defensive structures. Navarro nodded once. Expected. They're adapting faster than predicted. That's why they conquered 93 civilizations. Maya hesitated briefly. Do you think they'll retreat? Navarro looked toward the massive tactical projection hanging above the command floor. 740 alien warships surrounded Earth like steel predators preparing to bite. No, he said quietly. Empires don't survive long by retreating the first time someone surprises them. Across the fleet-wide communication network, human crews prepared for first engagement. Weapons systems unlocked. Shield arrays synchronized. Missile banks armed. Medical bays activated emergency protocols. Pilots climbed into strike craft. Boarding teams sealed armor. And throughout thousands of ships, ordinary human beings confronted the same terrifying realization. They were about to fight an alien empire in open war. Some crews dealt with fear through silence. Others through humor. On the destroyer Kyoto Wind, a weapons officer stared at the incoming Dominion fleet and muttered, "Well, this feels historically irresponsible." Half the bridge laughed harder than the joke deserved, because tension needed somewhere to go. On the carrier Valhalla station, one pilot quietly recorded a final message for her parents. Not because she expected to die, because pretending death was impossible felt childish now. Elsewhere, crews simply focused on work. Humanity's greatest strength had never been fearlessness. It was functionality despite fear. That difference mattered. Far below them on Earth, billions watched the impossible unfold. The hidden fleet had become public. Every screen across the planet now showed the approaching armada humanity had concealed for 32 years. News anchors struggled to speak coherently. Governments released classified footage explaining Project Aegis. Citizens stared upward at skies suddenly crowded with hope and terror simultaneously. The emotional shift was overwhelming. 12 hours earlier humanity believed extinction had arrived. Now, their species possessed the single largest fleet in human history. And it was coming home. Crowds gathered in streets worldwide watching streams of human warships accelerating inward from deep space. People cried openly. Strangers hugged each other. Some prayed. Some saluted. Some simply stared at the screens, unable to process the scale of what humanity had secretly built beneath the surface of ordinary civilization. In Lahore, civilians who had resisted Dominion occupation earlier now stood atop crowded rooftops watching the tactical broadcasts together. One young man whispered softly, "They were preparing all this time." Beside him, an older woman answered without taking her eyes off the screen. "No." Her voice trembled slightly. "They were preparing for us." Inside Geneva Bunker Command, Secretary General Sophia Devereux finally addressed humanity publicly for the first time since contact. The broadcast reached every surviving communication network on Earth. She stood alone behind a plain gray podium. No flags, no dramatic lighting, only exhaustion visible beneath calm eyes. When the Dominion arrived, she began quietly. Humanity believed it stood alone before extinction. Across Earth, billions listened. Sophia continued, "But humanity has never survived because we were the strongest species." The tactical display behind her showed Project Aegis moving toward Earth in brilliant streams of light. "We survived because every generation before us built something for the generation after. Factories, cities, medicine, science, families, civilization itself." She paused. "And 32 years ago, some people built this." The hidden fleet glowed behind her like artificial stars. "They built it in silence." Another pause. "They built it knowing they might never be thanked for it." Sophia's voice remained calm. That calmness made the speech stronger. "We are not alive today because humanity was fearless." She looked directly into the camera. "We are alive because humanity refused to quit preparing for tomorrow." Across the Dominion fleet, officers monitored the broadcast carefully. Most didn't understand the emotional impact. Executor Thalen Vey did. because he had conquered enough civilizations to recognize dangerous morale when he saw it. Humanity was no longer panicking. That mattered. Fearful populations surrendered. United populations fought. One communications officer turned sharply. Executor, additional human transmission incoming. Audio only? No, sir. Fleet-wide visual broadcast. Display it. The bridge holograms shifted. Admiral Navarro appeared again. But this time he wasn't speaking only to the Dominion. He was speaking to Earth too. Behind him stood officers from dozens of nations wearing the same fleet insignia. No separate flags. No separate governments. Just humanity. Navarro spoke calmly. For 32 years, Project Aegis remained hidden because survival demanded secrecy. His eyes stayed fixed forward. But today secrecy ends. The tactical image behind him zoomed outward. 5,182 human warships burned through darkness in unified formation. We were never building this fleet to conquer anyone. His voice hardened slightly for the first time. We built it because history taught us a simple lesson. A pause. The universe does not protect peaceful civilizations. Across Earth, silence spread through millions listening. Navarro continued. So humanity chose another path. The fleet behind him accelerated harder. We chose preparation. Another pause. We chose endurance. Then finally, and if necessary, the human admiral looked directly into the camera. We chose war. The transmission ended instantly. No music. No slogans. No applause. Just silence. And in that silence, something fundamental changed across Earth. People stopped waiting to be saved. Because for the first time since the invasion began, humanity looked back at the stars and saw itself standing there too. The species that would not break. The first shot of the war came from the Dominion. Executor Thalen Vey made the decision 3 minutes after Navarro's final transmission ended. He did not shout, did not threaten, did not hesitate. Forward batteries, he ordered calmly. Target the lead human formation. The bridge acknowledged instantly. Outside the sovereign judgment, Dominion warships shifted into attack geometry with terrifying precision. Energy built across massive spinal weapons running along the hulls of the frontline cruisers. Blue-white light intensified, stabilized, then fired. The darkness between Earth and the approaching human fleet exploded. Massive energy lances tore across vacuum faster than the human eye could track, slamming directly into the forward edge of Project Aegis. The battle for Earth began. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, alarms erupted instantly. Impact across vanguard sectors. Shield stress exceeding projections. Multiple hull breaches. The tactical display flashed violently as the first human ships absorbed Dominion fire. One cruiser vanished completely. Another spun sideways, venting atmosphere and molten debris into space. But the line held. Admiral Navarro never looked away from the display. Return fire. Thousands of human weapons ignited simultaneously. Missiles, rail cannons, particle lances, directed plasma systems. The darkness became saturated with moving light. Humanity had spent 32 years preparing for this engagement. And unlike the Dominion, they had prepared specifically for this enemy. That difference became obvious almost immediately. Dominion tactical doctrine prioritized overwhelming frontal superiority. It had worked for centuries, against every known civilization. But humanity attacked differently. Human fleets did not move like rigid formations. They spread, bent, shifted, swarmed, like living systems adapting in real time. Commander Miyasato watched attack vectors multiply across her console. Dominion shield overlap zones identified. Navarro answered instantly. Exploit them. Human destroyer groups accelerated directly toward gaps between Dominion formations. Not random, calculated. They targeted the weak seams where overlapping alien shield fields interfered with one another. The Dominion had never needed to defend against opponents sophisticated enough to study their geometry this deeply. Now those assumptions were killing them. 3 Dominion escort ships vanished beneath synchronized rail strikes before their shields fully recalibrated. Another lost propulsion instantly after concentrated missile saturation detonated beneath its ventral armor. Executor Thalen Vey watched the casualties appear across his tactical display. His expression remained controlled. But inside, something cold was spreading. The humans understood fleet warfare. Not primitive warfare. Not desperate resistance. Professional warfare. How? One officer whispered softly. Thalen already knew the answer. 32 years. Humanity had not spent those years hiding. They had spent them studying. Adjust defensive spacing, he ordered sharply. Expand combat geometry by 20%. The Dominion fleet adapted quickly. It always had. Alien formations widened, reducing human exploitation angles. Losses slowed. Then humanity adapted back. The second phase of the human assault struck 30 minutes later. Hundreds of smaller Aegis vessels broke formation intentionally, accelerating through concentrated Dominion fire toward the fleet center. Several exploded before reaching engagement range. They kept coming anyway. One tactical officer aboard the Sovereign Judgment frowned. They're sacrificing positional integrity. No, Thalen said quietly. They're sacrificing ships. And suddenly he understood the real problem. The Dominion fought to preserve victory. Humans fought to prevent extinction. Those were not psychologically equivalent motivations. On Earth, the battle became visible to the naked eye. Bright streaks burned across the upper atmosphere like artificial meteor storms. Entire cities stood beneath the night sky watching silent flashes of death unfold above them. People did not understand the tactics, did not understand the formations, but they understood one thing clearly. Humanity was fighting back. In Geneva Bunker Command, casualty numbers climbed relentlessly across the walls. Human losses, rising. Dominion losses, rising faster. Secretary General Sophia Devereux stood motionless beside the tactical feeds. General Cole looked toward her quietly. We're hurting them. Sophia nodded once. Yes. Not triumph. Not relief. Just acknowledgement. Because every green icon disappearing from the displays represented thousands of human beings dying in darkness. Above them, Project Aegis continued pushing inward. Human strategy centered around pressure. Relentless pressure. Never allowing the Dominion time to stabilize completely. Never allowing them predictable engagements. Admiral Navarro watched the evolving battlefield carefully. Executor Thalen Vey was adapting faster than simulations predicted. That was dangerous. Dominion center line restructuring, Maya warned. The alien fleet compressed into layered defensive arcs, protecting vulnerable command vessels while maximizing heavy weapon coverage. An excellent maneuver. Navarro almost respected it. Almost. Phase 2, he ordered. Across the battlefield, hidden human strike groups activated simultaneously. Hundreds of ships broke away from the primary engagement vector, accelerating around the moon's shadowed southern arc. The Dominion noticed too late. One alien tactical officer looked horrified. They're flanking through the gravity-blind zone. Thalen's eyes widened slightly. The maneuver was reckless. The flanking force would absorb catastrophic casualties moving through concentrated defensive fire. No rational species would accept losses that severe for positional advantage. Humans did. That was what made them terrifying. The flanking fleet punched through anyway. Dozens of human ships died during the maneuver. The survivors emerged behind Dominion secondary formations like knives appearing inside armor. Then they opened fire. The battlefield destabilized instantly. Dominion formations began collapsing under multi-directional assault. Human ships exploited confusion mercilessly. Rail impacts shattered shield junctions. Missile swarms overloaded defense systems. Electronic warfare platforms flooded Dominion coordination channels with interference patterns specifically engineered from decades of stolen intelligence data. The Empire's perfect formations began breaking apart. And once formations broke, humans became even more dangerous. Because chaos was humanity's natural environment. Executor Thalen Vey stared at the tactical display as casualty alerts multiplied faster than command systems could prioritize them. 21 Dominion vessels lost. Then 30. Then 47. His fleet was still stronger ship for ship. But the humans weren't fighting ship for ship. They fought like a civilization that had rehearsed dying. And that changed everything. One alert suddenly overrode every other system on the bridge. Warning. Human strike group approaching command cluster. Thalen enlarged the sector instantly. 11 battered human cruisers were accelerating directly toward the Sovereign Judgment through defensive fire. At their center flew a heavily damaged vessel broadcasting the call sign. Resolute Spear. Its hull burned openly. Atmosphere vented from entire sections. Kept advancing anyway. Destroy them, one officer snapped. Dominion batteries opened fire. 2 human ships exploded immediately. The others continued. One slammed directly into a Dominion escort cruiser at near-relativistic speed. The collision shattered both vessels. And for half a second, the escort's shields destabilized. That was enough. Human rail batteries fired through the opening instantly. The escort ship split apart. Inside the Sovereign Judgment, several officers stared in disbelief. They used their own ship as a breach weapon. Thalen watched the tactical feed silently. Humans were turning dying vessels into tactical opportunities. No simulation had predicted this level of psychological commitment, because no empire in Dominion history had ever faced a species this unwilling to stop fighting. The Resolute Spear emerged through debris clouds directly toward the command formation. The captain opened a direct transmission. The screen flickered. A wounded human commander appeared through sparks and emergency lighting. Blood covered one side of her face. Her expression remained calm. "This is Captain Elena Marquez of the Resolute Spear." Behind her, alarms screamed. "We're inside your perimeter now." The transmission cut abruptly as Dominion fire tore through the cruiser's rear hull. But the ship kept coming. Toward the Sovereign Judgment. Toward Thalen Vey. Toward the heart of the Dominion fleet. And for the first time in 93 conquests, Executor Thalen Vey realized something horrifying. Humanity was not fighting to survive anymore. Humanity was fighting to win. The day humanity changed the stars, the Resolute Spear struck the Sovereign Judgment at 0.91% light speed. Even in space, the impact looked violent. The damaged human cruiser tore through the outer defensive shields already weakened by overlapping bombardment and slammed directly into the Dominion flagship's lower command sector. Metal folded inward. Armor ruptured. Shockwaves rippled across the massive vessel. Entire sections of the Sovereign Judgment lost power instantly. On Earth, people watching the battle from below saw a sudden bloom of white fire erupt across the largest ship in the alien fleet. And across human cities, something impossible happened. Humanity cheered, not because the war was over, because for the first time since the invasion began, the Dominion looked vulnerable. Inside the Sovereign Judgment, emergency alarms screamed across collapsing corridors. Artificial gravity failed in multiple sectors. Smoke flooded command pathways. Bridge officers slammed against consoles as the flagship shuddered violently. Executor Thalen Vey grabbed the edge of his command platform while tactical systems flickered around him. Damage report. Lower reactor sectors compromised. Primary shield grid destabilized. Command cluster separated from escort support. The bridge lights shifted into emergency red. Human ships flooded through the opening immediately. Not hesitating. Not regrouping. Pressing harder. Always harder. That was the pattern. The Dominion expected enemies to retreat after taking losses. Humans accelerated. Admiral Navarro watched the tactical collapse unfold across his command display. The opening existed. Now he needed to end the war before the Dominion reinforcement fleet arrived. "Boarding teams," he ordered. "Launch." Across the battlefield, armored human assault craft detached from surrounding cruisers and accelerated toward the wounded flagship. Small targets. Fast targets. Designed specifically for this moment. Project Aegis had trained boarding divisions for 15 years. Most officers originally considered the idea unrealistic. Navarro insisted anyway, because he understood something simple. Destroying fleets ended battles. Capturing commanders ended empires. The assault craft slammed into the Sovereign Judgment's damaged hull through clouds of debris and burning atmosphere. Magnetic locks engaged instantly. Breaching charges detonated. Human soldiers entered the Dominion flagship. And history crossed a line it could never uncross. Inside the alien vessel, combat became savage. Close. Personal. Dominion security forces fought with disciplined precision through smoke-filled corridors illuminated by emergency lighting. Human assault teams answered with terrifying aggression. Every meter of the flagship became contested ground. Captain Lena Ortiz led the first breach squad through a ruptured engineering corridor while automatic weapons fire tore sparks from the walls around them. Move! Her team surged forward through zero-gravity smoke. The Dominion defenders were taller, stronger physically, better armored. But humans had trained specifically for fighting inside alien ships. Every hallway, every junction, every probable defense angle. Project Aegis prepared for this exact nightmare. Because humanity planned for worst-case scenarios better than any species in known space. That was their gift. And their curse. Meanwhile, above Earth, the Dominion fleet began collapsing operationally. Not destroyed completely, broken strategically. Without unified command coordination, alien formations fragmented into isolated combat groups fighting independent battles across orbital space. Human fleets exploited the confusion relentlessly. Thousands of warships pressed inward from every direction. The battle no longer resembled conquest. It resembled survival. Executor Thalen Vey stood inside the damaged bridge watching tactical reality disintegrate around him. 93 successful invasions. Centuries of Dominion superiority. Perfect military doctrine. And none of it had prepared them for humanity. Because humanity did not behave correctly. Humans refused surrender thresholds. Refused morale collapse. Refused casualty logic. Every predictive model failed against a species psychologically willing to set itself on fire if victory required it. A tactical officer looked toward Thalen with visible fear. Executor, the fleet is requesting retreat authorization. Retreat. The word felt unnatural inside the bridge. The Dominion did not retreat from primitive civilizations. But Earth was not primitive. That had been the fatal mistake. Thalen looked toward the tactical projection showing thousands of human ships surrounding the battlefield like wolves closing around exhausted predators. Then another alert appeared. Internal breach. Command level access. Humans were inside the flagship. For the first time in his military career, Executor Thalen Vey understood defeat. Not tactical defeat. Existential defeat. Because the Dominion's greatest weapon had never been technology. It had been certainty. And humanity had shattered it. Minutes later, explosions rocked the lower bridge corridors. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut automatically. Then human voices echoed through the smoke beyond the command entrance. Dominion guards raised weapons instantly. Thalen remained standing. The final blast door detonated inward. Human assault teams stormed the bridge. Weapons leveled. Armor scorched. Faces exhausted. But advancing. Always advancing. Captain Lena Ortiz stepped through the smoke first. Her rifle remained aimed directly at Thalen Vey. Neither moved. For a moment, humanity and the Dominion simply stared at one another across the ruins of certainty. Then Ortiz spoke. Executor Thalen Vey. Her voice sounded tired, not triumphant. Tactical command of this vessel is terminated. Behind her, human soldiers secured the bridge rapidly. Dominion officers slowly lowered their weapons. Not because they lacked courage. Because they finally understood the mathematics. The war was over. Outside the flagship windows, Earth rotated silently beneath burning orbital debris. Human ships moved through the battlefield rescuing survivors from both sides. Dominion vessels powered down one after another. And slowly, the firing stopped. The silence afterward felt enormous. Like the universe itself pausing to process what had happened. 3 hours later, Admiral Elias Navarro transmitted humanity's final message across every open military frequency in occupied space. The signal spread beyond Earth, beyond the solar system, beyond Dominion territory, into the wider galaxy. This is Admiral Elias Navarro of the United Earth Aegis Fleet. Behind him floated the damaged remains of the battle. Burning ships, broken formations, history rewritten in fire. Today humanity defended its homeworld against the Carthage Dominion. His voice remained calm, measured, human. We did not seek this war. A pause. But we prepared for it. Across distant systems, alien civilizations intercepted the transmission. Empires, trade unions, exploration fleets, species who had feared the Dominion for centuries suddenly listening to a civilization nobody had considered important. Navarro continued, "Let this battle stand as a message." The tactical image behind him shifted toward Earth. Small, blue, still alive. Humanity does not desire conquest. Another pause. But neither will humanity kneel. The transmission spread farther. Across colonies. Across hidden resistance networks. Across civilizations that had forgotten hope was even possible anymore. And for the first time in generations, the galaxy heard something new. Not fear of the Dominion. Fear of humanity. Navarro's final words echoed across the stars. We were never waiting to be saved. Then the transmission ended. And throughout the galaxy, entire civilizations looked toward Earth differently forever.